So here we are, thriving at work, supported by York Mind, and thriving at work, Emma will explain in a second, it's a project that's part funded by the European Social Fund with match funding provided locally, and it's a regional project supporting York, North Yorkshire and East Riding. And the lunchtime learning sessions are really a great opportunity to share some tips and hints around all things wellbeing, neurodiversity, disability, to help give people a bit of a taster session on stuff. So what we're hoping to achieve today is three things. One, just give you a little bit more information about thriving at work, and if you want to access some more information, you can do. Secondly, well-being in winter. Why are we doing this now? Why does well-being perhaps get affected a little bit more during the winter months? And really an opportunity to share some tips for you and your team. So there are aims for the session today. Okay, so if I can just pass you back to Emma, just to get a little bit more information about what thriving at work is and how this fits into the bigger picture, that would be great. Thanks, Emma.
Lovely, thanks Nick. So obviously you can see from the slide that this project has been designed with a vision for inclusive, accessible and healthy workplaces that increase productivity and create an environment where all employees can thrive. And it was very much born out of some of the learning from our other projects, where traditionally we've supported people into employment and we've looked at reducing their barriers to employment and why they may not have been able to access the workplace. But generally speaking, once people had progressed into work, that support had then had to stop. And for many people, the barriers that they had pre-work are still very much in existence, and we wanted to create a project that could really support individuals once they had progressed back into the workplace. And to do that, we kind of came up with this three-pronged approach. So looking at those individuals that might need additional support, looking at employed members of staff within your organisations that might need a bit of additional training or sort of knowledge to help support those staff, but then also looking at the organisation as a whole. And what we really want to achieve is to sort of improve the inclusive workplace practices of as many organisations as we can do. And I think one of the things that we're very aware of is that everybody wants to do a good job. Every organisation wants to be a great place to work, and sometimes it is just a case of steering people in the right direction or helping them sort of bring some of their ideas to life. So we have three main strands of the project. Inclusive workplaces, this is the strand that we engage with organisations as a whole, and we can provide sort of practical support to helping organisations become more inclusive and more diverse. And we can sort of support with things like policies and governance, recruitment and induction, culture and values, staff skills and training, quality marks and pledges, and sort of how we can bring reasonable adjustment and support into the workplace. So that is very much looking at organisations as a whole. We can also offer diversity training. So this training has been designed by our specialist partners and are really an introduction, so half day and full day training into sort of how to help support people that are neurodivergent, have a disability or work limiting health condition, or are maybe sort of experiencing mental health challenges. And then lastly, we have the workplace support strand, and this is specifically for individuals that might not be thriving, that might be really struggling in the workplace and need that little bit of extra support to help them to thrive. And again, it's specifically aimed at individuals that are neurodiverse, have a disability or work limiting health condition, or are experiencing mental health challenges. The beauty of the project is you can access any part of it. You don't have to access it all. You might think, I'd like to do some training, but I don't think we'd like to do either of the other bits. That's absolutely fine. We don't expect people to prove that they've got a diagnosis. It's very much about how individuals are feeling, and that they're feeling that whatever condition they may have is preventing them from progressing in the workplace. So it's a really, really great project. I know I'm biased because I manage it, but we do love it, and we think there's some real benefit to organisations and our sort of our colleagues, our staff, and our peers that could really take advantage of what the Thriving at Work offer is. So I think that's that in a nutshell, Nick.
No, that's fantastic. Thank you, Emma, for that. So I work quite closely with Emma, and my role within York Mind, I'm a coach and coordinator for the Thriving at Work project. So I do some of this workplace support that Emma's talking about. So I do one-to-one coaching with individuals, supporting around their mental health, but also kind of helping organise some of the training aspects as well. So York Mind are involved in that respect. Okay, so moving on to the learning lunch today. So well-being and winter, you know, why is it something that requires a little bit more of our attention? So I don't need to say it, but the continuation of the COVID-19 pandemic, it's still with us. We are 18 months in now, aren't we? This is our second winter going through. It's been tough. It's been really tough. And that continuation is still happening. That fatigue of all of the stuff is happening, and it's with us day in, day out. So that's one of the additional pressures that is happening at the moment. In addition to that, we also have things like the flu season and additional pressures on the frontline workers and services, particularly the care services and also frontline NHS. You will probably hear about it day in, day out in the news, but it's there. And there's existing pressures for each and every one of us, whether that be caring responsibilities, loneliness, worry about family and friends, and news exposure. You know, news exposure is very large at the moment. And, you know, day in, day out, we're getting all of this bad news actually about what is actually happening around us. New pressures kind of happening this time of year as well. You know, we'll all be familiar with things like the energy prices, rising prices in general, supply issues, you know, climate change. There's so much that goes on, that is going on, and it can be quite overwhelming for people. I think it's just important just to take that step back and just recognise the enormity of some of that is going on for us. This time of year as well can bring in additional financial pressures with Christmas looming. And also because of the Christmas season, that sense of loss at holidays for those that have been bereaved recently or many years ago, it can be a very poignant time for people. So it can be quite a difficult period for a lot of people, that either yourselves or people that you work with. And finally, just in terms of what is going on at this time of year, you will all be aware, you know, the darker and shorter days with the lack of sunlight. So, you know, we're on our way to the shortest day in December. You know, it's getting dark at 4:30. You know, the sun's not coming up till 7:30. It's a long time in darkness, and that can cause a lot of problems with lots of different things. You may have heard of SAD, which is seasonal affective disorder, which is something that can affect people, which is more than just winter blues, but can be really quite debilitating for people. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. But this season can affect our hormones in lots of different ways. Serotonin production can decrease, our circadian rhythm can get disrupted, vitamin D can be dropped, you know, because we're not getting that exposure to sunlight in the same way. And if I was to ask you a question, and if you're happy just to put an answer in the chat, how many of us do you think are affected by the winter blues, as I would call it? And how many people do you think are affected by that deeper level of seasonal affective disorder? Just give us a percentage guess. I'm going to get Emma just to have a quick look at the chat and maybe just tell us if anybody responds on that. But I'd be interested to know how many of you think are affected by these things during the winter period.
70%.
Okay, interesting.
65. Oh, they're going so fast. 80 to 90%, 60. I've definitely missed one, I'm sorry. 70 plus, 65%. So really, really high, actually.
Yeah, that's really, really interesting. You know, thank you for sharing that with us. In actual fact, it's a lot less than that, but it's interesting to see how people feel about that. The statistics tell us that 14%, so only 14% of us really kind of feel this winter blues kind of effect. But anecdotally, and interestingly, what I see there is that I feel it's much bigger than that, that people do experience that themselves or see other people kind of struggling a little bit. Those that suffer from SAD, so SAD, it's 6%, but even at 6% within the population, You know, that's, if you imagine a room of 16 people, not dissimilar to where we're at now, you know, that's one person within that grouping. So it's really important to be aware that people do struggle this time of year. And I think if you're at work or you're supporting people at work in your teams, it's having that awareness about just kind of really sense checking in with people at the moment, because things do change in this season. Okay. There's a continuum of well-being, which can range from, on one side, being wholly content, positive and optimistic, all the way through to kind of despair, hopeless, possibly suicidal. But I think with well-being in winter, you know, again, just the responses that from what people have said, I think that little phase can often move just a little bit further along on that negative side. So I think it's really important to get it on the radar at work, to think about how we can help support that, and what tips and hints we can do to kind of support our own, but also other people's well-being. In my coaching sessions, what I tend to use is this, I call it the Nick's Wellbeing Triangle, and it's something I refer to all the time, but it's a really kind of condensed version of our well-being, but it's an important as a triangle to have structure and kind of focus on each of those sides. It's important to focus on health in its broadest sense, both our physical health and mental health. Lots of things go into that, but actually, again, it's really important to sense check and think about, okay, what are we doing for our own health and well-being? You know, what do we know that works for us? What can we do to kind of develop that even further? Because by putting some attention on that, we can help improve our overall well-being. The same is also true from the support and connection side. So often in winter, there's a feeling where people withdraw a little bit, but actually to support our well-being, it's almost like we need to push it the other way to get that support and connection really kind of working for people. And the third side of the well-being triangle is all about what I call purpose and meaning. And that's our reason for being. That's our reasons for getting up in the morning. You know, that's what that stimulates us, that what helps gives us growth, development. And I think it's important to recognize that we need all of these three sides of the triangle to really kind of help us have really good well-being for ourselves. So a few tips, just going to throw lots of tips at you. And I think the key thing to remember, that triangle, it's a very unique picture for each and every one of us. You know, some things work for some people, some things don't, but there's some basics in there that we can all kind of just think about and plan for this time of year. So it's obvious, but I think it's worth kind of just reinforcing those points, that actually making the most of natural light. You know, I'm looking out the window here, the sun is shining, I'm inside and thinking, okay, you know, one of the things I try and do is on a lunchtime, I do try and get out at least for 5-10 minutes just to get that natural light exposure and to get that kind of vitamin D increase. Just actually being out in nature and being out in the light can affect all of those different things, like I've said before. It is recommended in our country through the NHS and the health services that it's worth considering taking a vitamin D supplement this time of year. I don't know how many people do. I'm not going to ask you. Important to think about that in light of any other medication you're on, and obviously get GP support on that. But it's something that that people are encouraged to consider this time in the autumn and winter months. We wouldn't necessarily get all of our vitamin D from food, and that exposure to sunlight can help that. And when we get reduced amounts of that, actually that vitamin can help support it. So try and make the most of that light. So if you can, you know, get out 10-15 minutes a day can make a real big difference. Also look at your basics, you know, in terms of how you're sleeping, what your diet is currently like, what your exercise routine is like. You know, are things lacking from a sleep point of view? You know, do you need to kind of just put a bit more energy into that, around perhaps having tech-free time before you go to bed, making sure you get into a regular time of when you go to bed, maybe practicing a relaxation technique before you go to bed, you know, some deep breathing, some meditative mindfulness kind of activity can really kind of help get that deep quality sleep that's needed this time of year. Try and avoid caffeine as well when you're thinking about diet. You know, perhaps think about moving towards more herbal kind of teas, and think about your diet, because food and mood, there's a massive kind of connection around gut and how we're feeling. you know, key things around hydration, nothing you don't already know, but it's really important to perhaps just really reflect about, okay, well, what am I actually doing? And now's a great time to get more of those kind of those vitamins and minerals into your diet, particularly in the winter months. And try and do some physical activity. Doesn't have to be onerous, you know, just kind of incorporating it into your routine, whether that be a little bit of gardening or a little bit of cleaning, or, you know, just out for a walk, whatever it might be. Just try and incorporate and make sure you're getting those basics on a weekly basis. I think it's also important to plan ahead for winter, you know, really kind of think about, actually, how do I operate? Do I know what works for me, what doesn't work for me? Really kind of think about what you can do to kind of plan and get things in the right place. For example, often, you know, people don't have the same energy to cook in the same way. So actually that batch cooking kind of approach, where you do, like, I don't know, a big slow cooker meal, or, you know, that you can then freeze up and put portions in the freezer. So when perhaps you're feeling a little bit lower, you can just grab into the freezer and get a good nutritional meal, but also not, if you're not feeling the need, you know, if you're not feeling or wanting to kind of cook daily, that can sometimes be quite a helpful kind of thing to do. Talk to your employer about extended lunch times. You know, again, kind of reasonable adjustments in the workplace. It might be that actually just having that little bit of extended lunchtime break to allow to help you to make the most of natural light can be really positive, and perhaps, you know, bolster on either end and just have that little bit more flexibility. Work-life balance. I often encourage people to think about that midweek Wednesday pickup, you know, in a week, and these weeks are flying fast, but make sure you've got that work-life balance. So having those boundaries once work finishes, being able to shut down and turn off from that, and then focus into what else is going on in your life, you know, and have those, whether that be, you know, picking up with friends midweek or doing some activity outside midweek. You know, think about your work-life balance and just ask yourself whether that does need to be adjusted again at this point. So adapt your routine for winter as well, you know. So, you know, try new things at this time. Sometimes it can be an opportunity, you know, so if you feel those kind of your mood and your energy kind of dropping, perhaps pick up a new craft, a new hobby, try something different, but also reach out to your support networks as well, because, you know, as I was saying, it's easy to kind of feel the need to almost hunker down, become a hedgehog, you know, hibernate this time of year. But actually, just reaching out, connecting with other people can really help us stimulate things like oxytocin, that kind of, you know, feeling heard, feeling loved, you know, doing things with other people. I can't emphasize enough that importance of connection. Going back to our triangle, it's so important to kind of keep connected and keep talking to people. So have a reflection about what works well for you, and perhaps what you've been struggling with, and really maybe just do some self-reflection around, okay, if I am struggling with some stuff, what can I do to overcome those barriers? Here at Your Mind, we really advocate this check-in, you know, check in on a daily basis. How are you actually doing? You know, be honest with yourself and decide how best to support your well-being, or reach out and talk to other people how best they can help support you with your well-being. You know, now's the time to kind of focus on self-care, you know, looking after diet, you know, hot baths, care routines, support your well-being through healthy habits. Adopting healthy habits aren't easy, okay? But sometimes I think if you can think about how you try and incorporate a habit into your new routine, you have more success of that actually taking place. So, for example, for me, kind of that lunchtime walk is, I recognise that for me, if I get out in that sunshine for 20 minutes on a lunchtime, that can make a big difference to how I think, feel, operate, okay? So in terms of adopting that as a healthy habit, what I do is I in terms of timing, looking at this little chart here, the cue bit, so making it obvious, I'm going to do that before my lunch. Okay, so on a daily basis, I'm going to get out in the sunshine and I'm going to kind of have that 20 minutes vitamin D injection. And I make it obvious by saying that I'm not going to do the next thing until I've done that. Okay. Making it attractive, so that craving bit, it's important to kind of think about, okay, well, what will make it attractive for me to do? So I know if I do that, I'm going to have my lunch. I know for my lunch today, I'm going to have a nice little pasta meal. So, you know, it's what's attractive, what is, you know, what is kind of going to allow you to make that healthy habit more attractive. Make it easy. So kind of that response. I know I can come up with lots of excuses about the weather, but I've got the hat, I've got the coat, I've got the brolly, I will go because I know it's easy for me to do. There's no reason why I can't do it. I've got the things in place I need to make me do it. So it's just about just following this cycle and actually doing it and making it satisfying afterwards. You know, I keep a track of how often I'm doing it. So I set myself a little goal that, you know, if I've achieved 4 times a week, fantastic. You know, I'm not going to beat myself up if I don't do it every day, but I think it is about, for me, there's that kind of reward of, yeah, I've achieved what I wanted to do this week. And that really, really helps me recreate that habit, because next week I know I've done it this week, so I want to do it again. So adopting healthy habits and incorporating them into other habits that you already have. So habit stacking can be really useful. So things like a walk, tagging it onto other things can really make a difference in how effective it can be to deliver. You know, so think about, you know, what are the things you would like to do? Think about how you can incorporate it into your routine and how you can make it obvious, attractive, easy and satisfying in that process. So I don't know whether you can see that, if you might need your glasses on, but this is what I've done in the next few slides. I've taken a few screenshots, another way of you thinking about things, from the Winter Wellbeing Toolkit, which is from one of our other minds within the country called Solent Mind. We're based obviously down in Southampton. They find, and there's a toolkit you can actually download, so I would recommend as a resource, this might be something that you go to afterwards if you're keen to kind of know a bit more. But I think sometimes as well, it can be useful to think about our well-being across those four different sections. So emotional, social, intellectual, and physical. You know, and they give just some ideas about what you could do around each of those. You know, in a week, if you try and perhaps just do one thing across each of those different things, linking back to our well-being triangle, it can really make a difference, these small steps in how you feel overall. So just grabbing a few from there. But like emotional, let's have a look. On the hour, every hour, take 3 deep breaths. Okay, I don't do that, but what I do is actually in between some of my coaching sessions, I do take a 5-minute break just to kind of think about my breathing, be a bit more mindful, just park what's been and refocus on what's going to be. But that deep breath allows my emotional physiology just to kind of rebalance. Okay, so that's something that I do, and I know that I kind of do regularly. Socially, yeah, I have a good WhatsApp friendship group, you know, actually just that, a little bit of fun around conversation with friends and reaching out there, I know is really important for me. So that's something that I do regularly. Or, you know, I'm very aware of kind of, you know, just reaching out and sending a text, as one of the suggestions is here, to someone you haven't caught up with in a while. I think this time of year, be aware of your friends and your networks. You know, if you haven't spoken to people for a while, you know, just reach out, just make that social connection. Going back to our wellbeing triangle of connection again is so important just to do. Intellectually, again, going back to that purpose and that sense of purpose, you know, perhaps learning something new that keeps our brain stimulated, that helps us feel that sense of growth, which gives us that dopamine hit, another of those hormones that kind of links into our well-being. Try something new, just challenge yourself to a little activity, or, you know, a challenge. I love this one here about challenging yourself to an afternoon without electronics, no screens until after dinner. I don't think my 2 teenage girls would like that, but you know, it's I think sometimes it's really important just to kind of switch off, get away from that blue screen time, and really just be more mindful in the moment. So different challenges that will just stimulate you, or reading or whatever, you know, just what works for you. You know, think about that very much on a personal perspective. And then the physical thing, again, you know, what works for you, what fits into your routine. You know, doing a marathon isn't for everybody. doing a 10-minute socially distanced walk might actually be really good for people, you know, listening to upbeat music. The power of music in well-being cannot be underestimated. It can change how you feel, it can change how you think, it can change how you can behave. Secret tip for me, I'm a bit of a Taylor Swiftie, you know, shake it off. It is often I can be in the kitchen cooking tea, doing a bit of Taylor, and actually that 5 minute just listening to music, just physically moving around the kitchen can really change how I feel, can really change how my well-being is. So doesn't have to be big things. Sometimes just a song can make a big difference to you. But think across those four. Think about what could actually make a difference for you. You know, everybody is different, and I really kind of emphasize that. I'm sharing some of my stuff here, but it is about you're a unique person. What works for you? What do you know will help? This time of year, as I've said, is also it's really difficult for people who are coping with grief and loss. You may be personally, there may be people in your team. Everybody grieves differently, and people remember and mourn in very different ways. But it can be more poignant as well this time of year for people. People may feel that what can be known as celebration guilt. Sometimes that routine can be the best tribute. Some people find that's not helpful for them, but I think it's important to acknowledge how you are feeling. These few questions here, again, part of this resource from Silent Mind, but this comes from Cruise, so who are an organisation that helps support people through grief and loss. I think it's about just really recognising what's going on for you and your feelings, and really where you can go to for support on that. You know, if you do need any further information around that, I do recommend you do kind of reach out and have a look at websites like Cruise, just to get an idea of what kind of support is out there. But it can be a very difficult time for people. And I think it's important to mention in this winter wellbeing section, because it can affect how people behave, it can affect how people are at work, and actually having those conversations with your staff, or sharing about how you're feeling with people, is a really important thing to do. Seasonal affective disorder. So this is sad, you know. I suspect a lot of people have heard of it. As I said, 6% of the population are affected by it. It's a level beyond kind of the winter blues, as I kind of described it. This is when it can be really debilitating. This lady Kim, who again is part of this toolkit, she kind of shares the journey that she went on. And often I think it's about really ensuring getting an appropriate diagnosis. So seasonal affective disorder, it is a form of depression, but it's affected by the changing seasons, and it can really affect mood and energy levels. And I think for some people it can hit a level where they really kind of are struggling to get out of bed, maybe finding it hard to sleep, and that motivation and energy completely goes. Now, if you are feeling like that, I would encourage you to reach out and visit your GPs to talk about that. That there are tips and hints, but they can support you as well in terms of, you know, what can be done. But you know, Kim's tips around this, you know, it's always about being gentle with yourself and don't put additional pressure on yourself. You know, for her, keeping the curtains closed on gloomy days and using lights to distract yourself from the weather outside. I kind of resonate a little bit with that. You know, when it gets to 4 o'clock and there's dark outside, actually I like to get into cozy house mode, you know, where I draw all the blinds, the lights go on. I do like a sparkly light. I do love plants. Kind of getting that cozy environment at home where you feel comfortable can be a really kind of a really important thing to consider, and to help you kind of you know, kind of if in like daylight hours where it's open the windows, get that fresh air in. It might make you feel less claustrophobic. So at different parts of the day, you know, you may need to adjust to kind of manage that seasonal affective disorder appropriately. So, you know, be aware it exists, be aware that people in your teams may be struggling from it, encourage people to talk, encourage people to seek support if they do need it. This time can be a really difficult one for parents and carers, particularly if you're supporting someone around mental health. You know, I would advocate that, you know, have those conversations, you know, really helping support someone living with a mental health issue. Winter can be hard for a lot of those reasons that we've kind of talked about, and it can be very overwhelming for people. But if you kind of work through these different kind of sections, it can help alleviate some of that. So do try and make a plan. You know, if people are struggling with this time of year, you know, particularly as things get busier, think about some of those practical things about, for example, picking up prescriptions or medication. You know, do some forward planning, some thinking about what you can do. Give people space. So being sociable or active isn't necessarily for everybody. It can make people very tired. It can make people stressed. Be aware of this. So allow that time alone to recharge and rest if needed. Set boundaries as well. So when things can become overwhelming, you know, what is and what isn't unacceptable behaviour, and make sure that you are setting boundaries around you and their kind of environment. And finding balance. So it can be tempting, if you are supporting somebody who is struggling, particularly with their mental health, to take care of everything for them. But it's important to encourage that ability to do things for themselves in a supportive way. So, you know, supporting them perhaps to make healthy meals, get fresh air, keep on top of things, but don't take over. So 4 kind of things there just to keep in mind and just to keep to think about. And yes, whilst it's for parents and carers, you know, it can affect us all in different situations. You know, again, kind of having conversations in the workspace can be really, really important. Little tip here as well, the worry tree, projected onto a Christmas tree because we're not that far away. But yeah, if you are finding that things are worrying you, you know, useful kind of process just to work through is actually, you know, what are you worrying about and can you do anything about it? So learning to really practically think about, okay, yes, I can, or no, I can't, and trying to kind of practice to let those worries go if there's nothing you can do at that particular point in time. If there is the yes, then you think about, well, how can we make a plan? What is it that we can do? And so the tree goes on in terms of when, how, so you can work through it. So try and take control where you can. Yeah, if you're needing more support, if you do feel kind of, you know, the worries and anxieties are taking over, do reach out and talk to people. Money, it's a biggie this time of year, you know. Just a few thoughts on that. There are kind of, you know, if you want further information on that, places like the Citizens Advice Bureau can be very helpful in terms of their financial support. But recognise that spending, particularly this time of year, can be very addictive. You know, we would encourage people to connect with the season as it is, get out in nature, you know, find ways to avoid those triggers and where you feel that you have to kind of to go out and buy. You know, I think expectations is really important. You know, I'm starting to have conversation with friends now about, actually, are we doing presents this year or not? You know, and actually just reducing and being mindful about actually what is appropriate and what isn't now. And I think it's a useful review to do for everybody every year, really, to kind of think about. We all get into habits, and that spending bit can be addictive, but actually just reviewing that and expectations can be a healthy kind of process to work through. You know, stick to a routine. If you know, if money management, you know, perhaps it is this time of year, there may be lots of opportunities to go out. It may be that actually just doing once or twice in a month is appropriate for you. Think about that, plan that, stick to that routine. You know, we would encourage and endorse people to think about enjoying the holidays with people, not your wallet. You know, it's about connecting, it's about that supporting. You know, it's hard, but actually, if you are a parent, resist that parenting pressure that can kind of come this time of year. But don't ignore debt. If you are in a situation where things have become difficult, you know, don't ignore the debt. Reach out, talk to people. There are organisations out there. There are some great websites as well. You know, the Citizens Advice Bureau is great, starter for 10. Money Helper is also another one which may help you plan, budget, etc. But don't ignore it, because then those worries, going back to our worry tree, they just escalate and they can get bigger and bigger and bigger, which can create a bigger problem. There is a big correlation between mental health and money. So it's important to reach out if this is something that is a problem for you. And I think to say it's okay not to like Christmas, it's not for everybody, you know. So, you know, be true to yourself, be honest to yourself, and find out what works for you. Okay. Some people find, and again, this is one part of the toolkit, that making your own winter self-care box can be quite a therapeutic thing to do. Again, very personal, but you can put all sorts of things in it. Just grab a box, you know, maybe think about, some people like to use their senses, so perhaps through a candle, or stimulating that intellectual piece through a puzzle, distractions, tissues if you're feeling a bit sad, you know, hot chocolate, breathing techniques, you know, perhaps just think about what works for you. It can be actual, you could actually create a box, or you can just metaphorically think about it, but actually what works for you in your own self-care box, what helps you feel good. Be aware of alcohol. You know, the celebratory spirit of Christmas and New Year can often involve social drinking. But be aware that alcohol, although it can make you feel more relaxed, it can act as a depressant, and drinking too much can cause low mood, irritability, and potentially aggressive behaviour. So, and it can disturb sleep patterns. So, so be mindful, think about number of safe units, think about your own mental and physical well-being, and be aware that alcohol may affect medication you're taking as well. It can be easy to just, you know, get carried away in the season that is, but be mindful of it as well, and just be honest with yourself in terms of where you're at. And likewise, linked to that, 'tis the season to eat well too. So, you know, winter and the festive period has become synonymous with overindulgence. Therefore, you know, just be mindful about what is good nutrition, balance, try and maintain that healthy diet, you know. And food, and a lot of processed food, can help bring our kind of how we feel really down. We can get quite lethargic and irritable. Be aware of that. Be aware in these darker winter months how that can make you feel. Everybody deserves a treat, you know, but just get that balance right with overindulgence and sugary treats. You know, think about that overall picture of your kind of your food intake over the winter wellbeing period. What works for me? So yeah, so for me, I'm a big believer in the daily walk at lunchtime. I set that walking challenge up for me just to encourage me to do it. I'm a big believer in cozy clothes, so I love scarves, although I've not got one on today, but I'm often seen with a scarf in the workplace. I love fairy lights inside. I love plants. I do take a vitamin D supplement. Kombucha is my new friend. So I like to enjoy a glass of kombucha, which actually in the week is a much healthier substitute than wine. So if you've not tried it, give it a go. It's a sparkly little number, but it's good for you. It's good for your health gut. But actually, I find that actually having a glass of that in the week is really kind of quite helpful for me. And I love my music, kind of, you know, as I said, kind of listening to tunes, changing things. So have a think about what works for you. Yeah, I'm not going to ask you now because I'm conscious it's 1:15. So, but just have a little think about what works for you and take that away with you. So in the workplace, you know, I'd encourage you to routinely check in on your own well-being, but also your team's. You know, encourage healthy activities where you can. So particularly around that lunchtime kind of piece, what can you do in those daylight hours? And encourage the use of wellness action plans. This is something I'm going to come back to in our next kind of learning lunch actually, but National Mind provide a resource called the Wellness Action Plans, which allows a vehicle to help kind of have conversations about what keeps people well at work. So we're going to go into a bit more detail with that next time, but it's a really useful vehicle for people to start to have those healthy conversations. And support social activities, you know, obviously with a caveat around COVID and what's happening at the moment, but you know, it's still important to have that social connection however we do it, going back to our wellbeing triangle. You know, constantly review those working environments. You know, since coming back after the pandemic, people going into offices, what are the environments like, what is working? You know, allow people the opportunity to talk about their feelings and explore support. You know, routinely seek feedback from staff about what works, but also kind of promote services that you have within your organisations. You may have employee assistance programs, counselling support, coaching, you know, something through Thriving at Work may be helpful to support people who perhaps are struggling at this time of year. So very quickly, because I'm conscious I said we'd do 45 minutes and I like to keep to time. So key kind of takeaways from the session, you know, keep that wellbeing triangle in mind, come back to it and have a look at this kind of recording if that's of use, just to kind of see it again. But think about our health, think about our support and connection, think about our purpose and meaning. Yeah, think about wellbeing ideas and what works for you. Yeah, it's a great time to just refresh and maybe instill some new habits that will help us keep well, particularly in this winter period. And think about how you can use the Thriving at Work project as well to fund and to kickstart positive change. So Emma kindly has kind of taken you through what Thriving at Work can be. And just quickly going back to that slide, if you do feel your organisations perhaps would benefit from that holistic view or individual training or workplace support, do get in touch and come back to us. And I'm sure Emma will say, but kind of a key kind of landing place for all of this is the Better Connect website. So if you just Google Better Connect, look at the projects and look for Thriving at Work there, that will help you get to the people that can help you.